Good evening. Thank you for joining us at our December board meeting. I am Leah Cruzy, board chair. Joining me tonight are my fellow board members and colleagues, Vice Chair Jim Sandman, Treasurer Chantel Wright, and Nick Rodriguez. Secretary Shakora Adamafanian is unable to join us this evening. Now, first, I want to apologize and acknowledge that we are late in getting started. We've had some technical difficulties with live streaming on YouTube. If you are able to access this audio and you can hear me, or for those who may be in contact with those who may be trying to find us the way that they're used to finding us, you can watch this live streamed through our website. So you can go to the dcpcsb.org website, go to where you see board meetings, go to today's date, and then you can register there to access this. For those who aren't able to be here tonight, it will be uploaded tomorrow to be able to watch if you weren't able to join tonight. So moving on, I want to make best use of everyone's time here. I'm really, really pleased to announce that last week, Carissa Stanley Beatty was approved to join the board. She's watching this evening and will be joining us next month. And while this is the end of the 2023 calendar year, we're really only about halfway through our 2023-2024 academic year. This is an important time for student education as it kicks off the school selection and enrollment process for students and families. First, on December 2nd and 9th, OSSE hosted the citywide public school fair, which is called EdFest. This gave families the opportunity to meet with and talk to representatives from both DCPS and public charter schools. This is why EdFest is so important. It gives parents and families the opportunities to learn about school programs and models all over the city, including and beyond one's own neighborhood. I'm so proud of, and as a parent, I am grateful for the rich variety of public school choice options that do not restrict access to where someone lives. EdFest is also important because it kicks off the My School DC lottery, which opened last week. During this lottery, families who wish for their students to attend a new school have the opportunity to submit an application. Those deadlines are February 1st for high school students and March 1st for pre-K through 8th grade students. And I encourage you to call the My School DC hotline at 202-888-6336 if you have questions. I've personally found the individuals answering the calls to be a really helpful resource in navigating the process, and they also provide support to non-English speakers. Tonight, we have two items on the public agenda, followed by a presentation on citywide accountability, for which we have a very, very special guest. We'll begin tonight with public comment, and as we move through each agenda item, Aisha and Courtney, our moderators for the evening, will unmute DC PCSB constituents, staff, or individuals speaking on behalf of a school. The hand-raising feature has been disabled, and individuals who've previously signed up to testify will be called upon. As a reminder, all written public comment is available to the public on our website. If you didn't sign up by sending your name to the public comment mailbox before this meeting, please submit your comments to public.comment@dcpcsb.org or call our public comment line to leave a voicemail testimony at 202-328-2660. Let's hear from the one witness who have signed up to testify this evening. I'd like to invite Josh Boots and invite you to keep your comments to 2 minutes.
I do not see Josh Boots in our attendee pool right now. I've been looking since you started speaking and I don't see him.
Since we're delayed, let's give another moment. Aisha, I'm going to proceed and hope that Mr. Boots may submit a written testimony for our review. This concludes the public hearing portion of our agenda tonight. Next on our agenda are charter school amendment requests, and for that I yield the floor to Hannah Cousineau, Senior Manager of Sector Planning and Compliance, to introduce the request from Apple Tree Public Charter School. And I would like to also invite representatives from the school to provide remarks regarding this amendment request. Jamie Miles, welcome.
Hello, my name is Hannah Cousineau, and I am a senior manager in the school performance department. Tonight, the board will hear from Apple Tree Early Learning Public Charter School regarding its campus name change amendment request. DC-PCSB approved Apple Tree PCS to operate a campus at 330 Maple Drive Southwest on November 19, 2019, with a name to be determined. The school now seeks to name this campus Apple Tree PCS Waterfront Station. The campus will open in school year 2024-25. Representatives from the school are available to answer the board's questions.
Welcome, Jamie. Thank you for your service.
Thank you for having me this evening. Good evening, everyone. I do not have any additional comments at this time, but I will answer any questions from the board, and thank you for the opportunity as always.
Jamie, I'll just kick it off and ask if you could recap for us the need for this. Just remind everybody what the circumstances are and what the need is.
Yes, the charter amendment was approved, or to open this new site was approved a few years back. And at the time, we did not have a name for the location. We just simply had the address of the site. And as we are now prepared to open the site in the upcoming school year, we wanted to give it an official name so that parents can find it through the lottery process, as you talked about earlier as well. We can be able to identify it on our website and on all of our publications. So the official name is actually Waterfront Station, again, which is actually right in the area at Waterfront in Southwest. That is the condo association, or the condo complex that will be there. And we thought it would be an appropriate name for the area. And so we're just at the place now where we need to give it an official name so that we can move forward and be properly identified across the city.
Does anybody have any questions? Great. All right. Thank you, Jamie. Lovely to see you.
Thank you all very much. Have a great one.
I'd like to now yield the floor to Starling Temp, Goals Specialist of Data and Accountability, to introduce the request from the Next Step Public Charter School. And I would also like to invite representatives from the school to provide remarks regarding this amendment request.
Hello, my name is Starling Temp. I'm a specialist in the school performance department. Tonight, the board will hear from the Next Step Public Charter School regarding its request to amend its charter goals and academic achievement expectations. The school seeks to amend its Adult Basic Education, or ABE, progress goals. The school proposes measuring ABE growth using educational functioning levels rather than grade level equivalencies. Next Step PCS seeks this adjustment because its assessment publisher, the Data Recognition Core, no longer generates grade level equivalencies for ABE tests. ABE tests measure educational functioning levels. National and local ABE assessment data are typically reported using educational functioning levels, including under DC-PCSB's Adult Education PMF. If approved, this change will retroactively apply to school year 21-22 and beyond. Representatives from the school are available to answer the board's questions.
Welcome, Dr. Robledo and Mr. Boswick. Would you like to provide any kind of elaboration to the amendment request?
Oh, you're on mute.
Unmute. Okay. Thank you. How long have we been doing this and still messing it up? Sorry about that. Good evening, Board President Cruzy, board members, Dr. Walker Davis, DC-PSB staff, and community members. My name is Dr. Vivian Robledo, and I am the Executive Director of the Next Step El Próximo Paso Public Charter School. I am here with Thomas Boswick, our Director of Data and School Performance. Thank you for having us this evening and allowing us the opportunity to explain our charter goal amendment proposal. At the next step, our mission is to provide students who face extraordinary challenges and who are not supported in traditional high schools with the opportunity to continue their education. Our students come to us with a wide range of academic ability, and many experience large gaps in their education. To provide the most appropriate education, TNS has been using TABE, which is one of the most comprehensive and reliable academic assessment tests in adult education. Originally, TNS was using TABE 910. The TABE 910 assessment was discontinued by the publisher Data Recognition Corporation, and it was replaced with the TABE 1112. The next step transitioned then to administering TABE 1112 for the 1920 school year. Unlike TABE 910, TABE 1112 assessment does not provide grade level equivalent progress data. Because of this, we are unable to calculate our goals as written, and all previous methods of calculating grade equivalency have been deemed invalid by the testing vendor. So we propose this new goal that aligns with TABE 1112. Unfortunately, this goal, this change aligns with the National Reporting System for Adult Educational Functioning Level descriptors, and they are acknowledged by most appropriate standards for tracking educational gains for adult learners and are used for TABE scores as well, which is this amendment we are requesting for this proposal. We work closely with PCSB staff to determine a rigorous but fair goal using best practices for adult schools in DC and the recommendations for vendors and historic TNS data. So this new proposed goal aligns with the revised adult accountability framework. And that's why we are proposing it this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Robledo. Board members, do we have any questions?
Yes, thanks very much, Dr. Robledo. Just one question. Were there kind of alternatives that you looked at that would have been typical to consider for something like this?
Yes, and I'm going to pass it to Tom, who really did all the work with Starling to figure that out.
Good evening. Yes, we did consider a few different options before landing on a final agreement. We worked with the vendor, the DRC, to gather their recommendations or non-recommendations of what to do. And we also looked at other schools around the city. And after doing sort of a after we determined that certain options weren't viable, then we sort of came to our final conclusion, and it just so happened to align well with the new accountability framework.
Great, thank you.
I think this may have been just said, so forgive me for asking you to repeat. Does this apply to the current school year we're in, or for subsequent years?
It would be retro.
Okay, any additional questions? Okay, thank you. Next step, PCS representatives for joining us this evening. We appreciate your service. And this concludes the public hearing portion of our agenda, which is now when we can enter in to the public hearing. May I have a motion to approve our agenda?
I move to approve the agenda for the December 18th, 2023 board meeting.
I second.
Thank you. May I have a roll call vote? I'll begin with Jim Sandman,
Aye.
Chantel Wright,
Aye.
Nick Rodriguez.
Aye.
I am also an aye. And next on our agenda is the overview of accountability systems. For that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Michelle Walker-Davis.
Thank you, Chair Cruzy. Tonight, we have a special guest who is also a leader of an important district agency and collaborator. I am speaking of Dr. Christina Grant. As you all know, Dr. Grant is the State Superintendent of Education and heads the office that we all know as OSSE. Dr. Grant and I work closely together, and we both have deep beliefs in inclusiveness and equity and believe it is needed to truly transform public education and our world. I'm pleased to have her as an ally in state level accountability. And I'm pleased that equity and inclusiveness is an essential part of our revised accountability frameworks that we will talk more about tonight. Tonight, we'll discuss how the city has two accountability systems, one for all public education, which is administered by OSSI and is required by federal law, and a second one, which is administered for public charter schools by this board, DC PCSB. Both are important and both support and complement each other. Before we begin, I would like to check in, as we customarily do here at DCPCSB. As this board knows, and as our viewing public has come to understand, we at DCPCSB have embarked on a racial equity journey. We use the Courageous Conversation Protocol to help us engage in dialogue about race, and we find that the protocol is an effective tool for engaging in many conversations with one another with honesty, open-mindedness, and vulnerability. And it helps us to listen deeply, to better understand multiple perspectives, and to acknowledge the discomfort that may come up when we experience those different perspectives. So I will model our protocol and then invite Dr. Grant, if you will, to join me in doing the same. Today, I am showing up in the believing and acting spaces, as I am often showing up on our compass when I talk about education. Believing because I deeply believe that every student should have access and opportunity to reach their highest potential. And I see the oversight work that we do here at DCPCSB and the accountability conversations that we're going to have tonight as contributing to that goal, and acting because of my role as co-presenter with Dr. Grant today. And I just want to also lift up the identities that I'm bringing into this discussion. As this board knows, I am a Black woman of Caribbean descent, and as a child of immigrants, I am a first-generation consumer of public education in this country, a first-generation college graduate, and I think most importantly, a parent of middle schoolers who are navigating our system here in DC. And as a longtime educator, I'm bringing in multiple perspectives from the various sectors that I've worked, not just our charter sector here, but the traditional district, governmental, and nonprofit. And so those are the identities that are top of mind for me, some of which I share with Dr. Grant. And I would ask you, Dr. Grant, to certainly introduce yourselves in terms of where you are on the compass, and then certainly start with your remarks for this evening. So thank you for being here.
You know, in 3 years, it's taken a while for me to get invited to the public charter school board meeting, but a great topic and a great evening. It's so good to see so many familiar faces. It's a joy to do work, hard work, important work, but alongside people who truly believe in what's possible for our children. You all don't have easy jobs. And so again, thanks for letting me be here. I am so nervous about this check-in. It's like, I'm not nervous about the presentation, but I want to get my check-in right. I've been looking at the compass all day. So good evening, Dr. Walker-Davis again, and good evening, members of the Public Charter School Board. Thanks for inviting me to engage in this conversation, particularly around accountability in the District of Columbia. It's near and dear to my heart and the folks who do the great work of OSSI. So my name is Christina Grant. I know I got that part right. And today I'm showing up in the thinking and feeling quadrants. Thinking seems obvious, but the work that we do and the conversation we're going to engage in today requires a tremendous thought that's existed over years of time, thousands of stakeholders, all in service of our children. And I'm always mindful of the privilege. I'll get to that more when I get to identity, but the privilege and joy that we all have. Like, I have the privilege to tell people that I think for a living. Like, my job is to think and to encourage others to think. And through our thoughts, we make things possible for children. And so, like, I place a lot of energy and effort on the quality of thought, the precision of thought, how we articulate those thoughts. It's probably why I talk a lot. And then feelings. One, because it's the holiday season. And so as we all, some of our charters have already began their holiday break or their winter break. Others are doing it this week. And as we gear up for a season that's usually filled with joy and revelry, we all know that there are other individuals where there are deep feelings and emotions that play out as they navigate. And I'm caught in the interplay of public charter school board meeting, want to be super present, and then also acknowledging, folks who are just not having the most positive time. And so always being mindful of checking on folks, the folks we know that are not okay, and then the folks that always appear to be okay. Those like super high functioning people in our life, make sure you touch base with them. And I think the intersection, I try to bring my full self to this work. I always play between my thoughts and my feelings. The work is deeply personal to me, deeply personal. It aligns with the identities I show up in this space because I too am a first generation college graduate. I deeply believe in school choice, primarily because my parents lived in a zip code that every single day they were navigating what was possible for my education through the lens of the choices that they were able to make. And so my mother could choose to send me to a private subsidized early childhood center. And then she chose to send me to my neighborhood elementary school up the street. And then through a lot of interesting ways, I was able to go to a private middle school because faith was really important in my family. And then because my parents couldn't afford private high school, I went to public high school. And then I was a teacher, and then I was a charter school teacher, and I've been an authorizer in 2 different states. I've ran a charter network, and all of those identities play out in my professional space. But as a first generation Black woman who, operates in a lot of privilege because I was born into a family with 2 parents who every single day came home and worked really hard. I think about the children in our system every single day that aren't living the life that I was blessed to live, right? That they need us to operate every single day in places and spaces and fight to ensure that they get access to a quality education. And those identities play out every single day in the work. I too am thrilled to do this work alongside Dr. Walker Davis. I think Washington, D.C. is truly fortunate to have leaders who have designed accountability frameworks in other jurisdictions, play them out, and have also authorized schools. It serves us well as we do this work because I'm keenly aware of the lane that Dr. Walker Davis owns and operates and the power that you all leverage as members of the Public Charter School Board and how that relates and interplays with what it means to be a state education agency and the role we play in the full accountability and compliance of schools in our system. A lot of people miss that, but I think it's important to state it in this space because it's what makes DC unique and special. I'm going to start going through our presentation. I'm not sure who's driving the slides, but I do want to underscore that I know the importance of the business that's before you at your monthly board meetings and that our schools are preparing for their holiday break. So I'm going to try to be brief because I know that you all want to get through your evening. But my goal this evening is really to help the board understand the differences between our accountability system through OSSE, or affectionately, or the Office of the State Superintendent of Education, which is a mouthful, and our state level accountability and school improvement efforts, and that of the Public Charter School Board as the authorizer for the district. We must have a strong state and charter accountability systems. It's critically important that we have 2 systems, and we can get into that a bit later. We both have state level functions though, and I think that that is important for people to see, understand, and process. And I enjoy sharing that space with Dr. Walker Davis. Though we're governed differently, both of our roles are critical and important, and the accountability and our approach to accountability is necessary. I'm pleased to walk through the journey. I started in my check-in by framing the thought partnership that's involved in this work and the journey we take to find ourselves here today. Our key role is to collect and report the data on all of our DC public and public charter schools for the public to understand a school's performance, the offerings, and to have them understand that in an equitable, accurate, and easy to digest way. This work is required through the Every Student Succeeds Act, affectionately known as ESSA, and we must develop a state accountability plan that outlines how the state will designate low-performing schools for additional support and technical assistance to aid school improvement. That is work that is federally required for us to do. OSSI functions as the state education agency for the District of Columbia, and we've been working to implement and be in compliance with these federal requirements since ESSA was enacted in December of 2015. We work with the DC State Board of Education on the approval of our statewide accountability plan, and then we submit this plan to the United States Department of Education. This most recently played out in our work in 2002. Our work occurred, our first iteration of our accountability plan, it occurred in 2017, and we went through a robust, if you track this timeline, a robust process of amending our accountability framework. And that amendment, we received that amendment in July of 2022. I'm super thankful for the framing of EdFest and the joy we had over the last set of weeks. The release of our DC report card is an amazing set of data that allows families to have access to information about all of our schools. And we are super excited that we released the updated version of our report card in December. Next slide, please. Our accountability system provides uniformity across both DCPS schools and public charter schools. Under the state system, all of our schools are provided a summative score that includes data from a number of metrics, including academic proficiency. Let's stay there for a second. Academic proficiency, growth, attendance, graduation rates, college and career readiness. Schools can earn a summative score of up to 100. These scores are ultimately used by OSSI to identify schools targeted for school improvement. During a designation year, schools that perform in the lowest 5% of all schools receiving Title I Part A funds on the state accountability system are identified as comprehensive support and improvement low performing, or CSI schools. OSSI then identifies the lowest scoring elementary and middle schools and lowest performing high schools. Depending on federal funding available and their plan, each school may receive supplemental funding to support school improvement work alongside technical assistance supports. In each cohort, each of the schools receives approximately $300,000 annually to implement the strategies and practices related to school improvement. These specific metrics that make up a school summative score that ultimately measure academic achievement, academic progress, school quality, and student success differ depending on which framework is applied. There are 3 frameworks. There's an elementary school with pre-K, there's an elementary school without pre-K and middle school, and then there's a high school framework. In the next 3 slides, I'm going to articulate, I will not read all of the metrics, but I will show the distinctions between each of the metrics for each framework. But we will share these slides so that you can refer back to them. And so let's look at, this is the way the point distribution is laid out for elementary schools that have pre-K. I'll just sit there for a second. And then let's shift to the metrics for elementary school without pre-K and with middle school. And again, we will share these or have them posted. And last but not least, let's show for high school. And so you'll see, even when we get to the high school distribution, you'll see schools receive points for dual enrollment, for AP and IB participation, for AP and IB performance, for SET College Ready benchmark. And so we worked really hard with stakeholders through our organization and through state board to have a point distribution that mirrors the grade bands of the school, but also really does speak to aspects of school design and opportunities for students. And I don't know what's going on outside, but it's quite noisy, and I hope that it's not disturbing this conversation. Let's move to the next slide. Yeah, I'm just like, I don't know what's happening on North Capitol tonight. The cadence of OSSE's school improvement work under our state accountability over the next few years is also important to understand. Each cycle, OSSE issues 2 school-level designations based on overall school performance. And you can see before you, 1 designation is for comprehensive support and improvement schools. That's our CSI schools. And then a second is comprehensive support and improvement schools, low graduation rate. Every high school where less than 67% of students graduate receives this kind of support. And so we always want to call that out, because there's always a conversation about the bottom 5%, but we want to delineate and frame that we actually make 2 designations, 1 on the bottom 5% and then 1 on high schools that have low graduation rates. Each 3-year school improvement cycle provides an opportunity for DC's lowest performing schools to work with their communities to urgently improve and to push for outcomes for their students. The first cycle of schools were designated by OSSE in 2018. This cycle included 2 null years due to the COVID pandemic, and that's because we received a waiver on assessments during the pandemic. The currently designed schools started a shortened 2-year cycle year in 2022. The next full 3-year school improvement cycle will begin in 2024, and that will be based on data from the 2023-24 school year. CSI schools are eligible again for funding, and they receive approximately, again, $300,000 annually to support implementation of their school plan. I'm gonna try to move a little faster. I'm so sorry. Schools, nope, we're not at questions yet. This is important because if those of you who attended the accountability hearing that Dr. Walker Davis and I did together, we are trying to help folks normalize the school improvement cycles, how schools entered into a cycle, and when the next cycle will begin. And it's important to note because the impact of COVID interrupted the cycles, if that is easy to understand. Schools designate their designation status when they improve overall, not just because their summative score goes up or if another school goes down. The data and information connected to the state accountability system can be found on all of the DC school report cards. The most recent report card for school year 2022-23 was released on December 1st, and it ensures that on an annual basis, parents and families, again, will have important data and information when looking at their child's school and local education agency. OSSE is really excited and proud of this year's report card, as we have moved the presentation and data and information from stagnant PDF files to an online display featuring 5-year historical data and more detailed disaggregations by grade band, student group, race, and ethnicity. We're like really, really proud of how far we've come with our report cards. And we're working to do even more. Together with the Public Charter School Board staff, our team has prepared a document that directly compares the Public Charter School Board's PMF and the OSSE state accountability systems side by side. We will host this both on our website as a public-facing document so that we can help stakeholders understand the distinctions. I hope that this additional information will provide the board with more clarity and understanding as it relates to the technical aspects of the state level accountability system as you consider revisions to the performance management framework for charter LEAs. As many of you know, I've said this before, but prior to joining as state superintendent here in DC, I served served as the chief of charter schools and innovation for the School District of Philadelphia. And for context, that's 87 individual LEAs serving a little under 100,000 students. I deeply understand the importance of having a strong charter school authorizer. In fact, learned a lot from the Public Charter School Board while managing that system in Philadelphia. It is important to have a strong authorizer with their own accountability system to make their own oversight decisions about their portfolio of schools. In the district, we are truly fortunate to have a charter school authorizer who is viewed in this space as a leader, as an exemplar, across the country. Many states and jurisdictions look to DC and their authorizing practices as a model for how this work can be done well. And so I think it's important as state superintendent to name that. Through the conversations such as this one this evening and the willingness for Dr. Walker Davis and her team to have this conversation as we've navigated our framework change and you all are going through a process of making revisions to your framework. I'm encouraged that we'll continue to work together to ensure that both of our systems, the new Public Charter School Board system, continue to speak to each other and work alongside each other, given their two different functions. It's our hope that we're always making music and adding different notes along the way. I'll turn things over to Dr. Walker Davis, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. See, there's a question slide. Kelly was very excited to get to it.
Thank you, Dr. Grant. Board members, I have just a few slides that will actually help us compare the two systems. So I don't know if you have clarifying questions right now for Dr. Grant, or if you'd like me to proceed and then we can ask all of them together.
Why don't you proceed?
Okay. Great. Thank you, Dr. Grant, for sharing the state accountability system update that you provided. Before I do share some specifics about how the systems work together and are different from each other, I would like to start by reminding us about how we will use our accountability system. Slide 2, please. So following guidance from the National Association of Charter School Authorizers, NACSA for short, our accountability system analyzes school performance as part of an effort to make sure that every student gets an excellent education at our schools. And we strongly believe that this revised accountability system reflects our mission and vision, which we collectively as a board revisited and recommitted to with our strategic roadmap. And specifically, this is a tool for our board to make school oversight decisions. We use this as a staff, to publicly release information about schools annually. We also encourage our public charter school leaders to use this system to understand and improve their impact on student success. And again, since we do make the results of our public framework, seeing that we do make the results of our framework public annually, we do hope that families and communities will use the system to know how students are supported by schools. So again, the primary reason of our framework is for board oversight, but we recognize those other uses. This is a slide that this board knows all too well and that we frequently share when talking about this work, and that is because our accountability system is undergirded by these guiding principles. When we looked at our performance management framework, we know, as Dr. Grant mentioned, that this is work that is nationally recognized, and we wanted to make sure that we maintain the things that were good about our performance management framework, but also look at revisions that would continue to hold each school accountable for ensuring that all students meet or exceed high performance and/or improvement targets, and that we stayed true to our commitment to acknowledge that an excellent school is equitable. With the help of our school leaders, this board's counsel, and the expertise of data experts, we've made changes to this system that we do believe will shine a light and give us a more accurate set of information on where our bright spots are but also where we have work to do to increase student academic outcomes. And as you see here, there are some values about making sure that we look at growth and making sure that this is a rigorous and attainable system. Next slide, please. As Dr. Grant just walked through for us, ALSE's accountability system is very similar to the accountability system that we are prepared to propose to you in some ways, and also different in other ways. Both systems will provide a summative score out of 100 to public schools. And in the beginning, our accountability system, because we are going to be including school-specific performance metrics, at least initially, it will start with 90 points possible, but ultimately get to 100 points possible, including those school-specific measures. The scores are calculated by evaluating several different metrics, which vary by sub-framework. OSSE, as you can see, has 3 sub-frameworks, as Superintendent Grant shared, and our framework will have our system will have 5 sub-frameworks. That's the pre-K only schools, and that is because we do have some schools that only serve pre-K. We have pre-K 8 schools, and we've discussed previously that there are multiple sub-frameworks in that band. We have a high school framework. We also have an alternative school framework and an adult framework, which is one that is not captured by the state accountability system. You'll see here on this chart that both of the systems consider student demographics when calculating a school's scores. The categories are similar across the 2 systems, but notably, our DC-PCSB proposal considers at-risk students to include high schoolers who are overage and under-credited. And that is not an aspect of the current state system. We also consider, different to OSSE, students who are not at risk, as opposed to the all-student category that you will see in the OSSE system. And I think you have probably surmised that the pieces that are in bold under DC-PCSB are where there are major distinctions in our framework. In addition, you will see in the student group that there is a different weight for our emerging multilingual learners, which is the same as the English the English learner category under OSSE, but you'll see a different weighting there. An important metric that both systems use is our college and career readiness, which measures student achievement in advanced coursework at the high school level. As DC-PCSB's framework includes adult education schools, you will see that we consider career readiness to also mean high achievement on career and technical education courses. Next, both systems consider post-secondary readiness as well. PCSB's once again measures career acceptance here, acknowledging that our adult schools and that our high schoolers may pursue other paths after graduation. Would like to go to slide 5. So we've showcased some other key differences between our system and OSSE's relative to 3 of our 4 metric categories in our proposed system. You'll see here that both systems consider academic progress, which we call school progress in our system, because we place an intentional effort and emphasis on schools' impact on students. Academic progress here measures how students are progressing in their learning based on assessment data. So you see that as the general category that we've been calling growth. Both systems use growth to proficiency as a measure of growth. Growth to proficiency measures students' progress towards proficiency in the ELA and math state assessments. OSSE uses this across its 3 sub-frameworks. DC-PCSB does not use growth to proficiency for pre-K only, because that metric requires 2 years of state assessment data, which does not exist for our pre-K only schools. And for our pre-K only schools, we propose a category measure of kindergarten growth on the NWE MAP test. We also do not include growth to proficiency at the high school level, although I will name that we have been talking to our high school leaders about other ways that we can include growth in their proposed framework. At the high school level, you'll see that OSSE's primary growth measure is growth to proficiency, while we focus on MGP, and both systems consider the median growth percentile at the pre-K-8 level. Would like to also point out here that access growth captures English language acquisition for English learners per OSSE's language, and for us, we use emerging multilingual learner for our language. And PCSB is including access growth metric in our new proposed system. So that is something new to our work, and we think it does recognize the growth potential there. Most notably different between our system, our proposed system, is that it includes bonus points for schools based on a school-selected assessment at the pre-K-8 and high school levels. And at the pre-K only level, we give extra emphasis on the school environment category. In terms of the school achievement category measures, this is the area that measures how well schools prepare students to meet college and career readiness benchmarks. Generally, both systems use the same model to consider assessment scores. Differences in college and career readiness considerations were talked about in that previous slide. And then finally, as mentioned, DCPCSB places an extra emphasis on the school environment category for our pre-K only schools. Like OSSE, it does use the class to measure early education student learning environment. There are other metrics for DCPCSB's environment category with the other sub-frameworks, but primarily for pre-K only, we are looking at class. We didn't discuss the final category in our system, which is the mission-specific goals. It is one of the areas that I'm the most excited about in this revision, because this is a very special and unique part of our system, different than measures that would appear in the state accountability system. And it is something that we are encouraged to do from NACSA. And I think it's an opportunity for us to really tap into some of the innovative ways that charter schools, each charter LEA is uniquely serving its student population. And then the last and probably the piece that is going to be the most significant shift to socialize is that our system is based on now 5 levels with our level 1, being the highest level, and that does differ from the OSSE model, which, as Dr. Grant just explained, now has 2 levels of designation. And our final slide is about our timeline. This is just a quick reminder that we are still in the process of revising our accountability system. As you well know, staff is actively gearing up to be able to open our technical guide, which explains the accountability system and how it worked in February. So we are looking forward to opening the public comment and having robust conversations formally with the board around this framework and having something actively before you to consider. So I hope that this was informative. I know it was a lot of information. We tried to distill all of that onto a few slides, but I hope that this is an opportunity to shed a light on how these systems are similar but different, and as Dr. Grant said, can work complementary to provide a different body of information for various stakeholders. So with that, I think both Dr. Grant and I are now happy to answer any questions that you have. And we can go back to any slides that you need to, if you need to see those again.
I want to preface by saying thank you. Thank you to you both for this very, very thorough presentation. Dr. Grant, thank you for being here tonight. You have a lot on your plate, and for you to make the time to come join us and talk us through this highly technical work that's really, really important and helps us give a more complete picture, get a more complete picture for ourselves, but also share with the public the ways in which this is highly technical and detailed, but also can be distilled down to ensuring that parents and community members and all stakeholders can make informed decisions. I think it would be helpful to have the deck at the ready so we can kind of navigate back and forth. And as we do that, I want to just express gratitude to be a resident of the District of Columbia, and to be a parent here, because these systems are so complex, and it is clear to me that this is a place that makes possible a variety of learning journeys for families to access from wherever they are, a broad range of learners from the youngest to our eldest. And that's so incredibly unique. And the work that we are doing here is to ensure that our public investments to provide equitable access, yielding the benefits for every single learner in our city. And we know this work is difficult. So I guess I would like to kick it off with a kind of an open-ended question before my fellow board members can also jump in of what kind of lessons have you learned throughout this public engagement process? Because this is highly technical and it's informed by a wide range of communities throughout DC. So as you can kind of reflect back on what you've learned throughout all of this learning and listening process, that's informed what we discussed tonight.
I will start, and then Dr. Walker Davis would love for you to weigh in on what you learned. One, we should be really grateful that we exist in this system where families, stakeholders, even students, our high school students, deeply invested in the way we design our framework, how we talk about school quality. When we say the word like this is a good school, what do we mean when we say that? For most of us, it means how we feel when we walk in the school, or if we have children in the system, we feel like they're getting a great education. But the learnings through this process, neither of us said this, but we should have noted that the shifts we are making in the framework are equity driven. They ensure that we are having the right conversations about school quality, and that we are giving our schools, credit's not the right word, but I can't find a different word, but we are acknowledging, that's a better word, the unique set of ways that our schools are supporting the diverse set of learners that we have. It's important that we name emerging learners. It's important that we look at subgroup performance. It's important that we acknowledge not just the performance of our students on our standardized assessments, but we acknowledge schools that have AB programs and dual enrollment, CTE offerings. Both the shifts we made at OSSI and the shifts that are currently being explored at the Public Charter School Board are ensuring that we are not just saying we are an equity-driven system, but that our accountability frameworks reflect that vision and mission of what it means to go to school in Washington, D.C. And that is something we should be proud of. I think the biggest learnings, even I was having flashbacks when you were doing the side-by-side, Dr. Walker Davis, because I was like, oh, I know how we ended up with, 5 points here or 15 points here, and like deep, robust conversations. We're going through engagement sessions right now with the State Board of Education just on the design of the report card. Like, how do we visualize what we've gotten approved? And it's a joy to see individuals deeply committed to how our frameworks tell the stories of our school performance. So one, that was the biggest lesson. And the second is this takes time. We have to do it in community. We can't do it to community. And that means a lot of time with the community. And the tensions should exist. And it forces us to go back and rethink. I remember, when we delineated the pre-K framework and then the elementary and middle school framework, because we needed to acknowledge the robust investments we make in early childhood education and how that plays out in our pre-K-12 system. And so, I think the biggest learning is grounded in gratitude for the folks who have gone on the journey with us. We had a unanimous vote from our State Board of Education. And so the technical side of this work, ensuring that those individuals all understood the work, believed in the work, that's the joyous part of DC, even though redesigning accountability frameworks is no small task, which is why I hope we will not endeavor to do it for at least a couple of years. And I think the only other learning is that there's more work to be done. So robust conversations around how we discuss the performance of our high schools, robust conversations about school climate, and how do we measure climate so that we have even more insight on what takes place in schools. And as you've heard, our frameworks are more than just performance on assessments. And as we keep making them iterative processes, they continue to tell a stronger story about school quality. But Dr. Walker Davis, I'm not sure if there's something you would add there.
I would double click on what you've said. For me, what was affirmed, I don't think this was learned, it was affirmed that all of our stakeholders believe that accountability matters. We can have conversations about what are the right measures to include and how many points to assign to them. But the difficult part of this, as Dr. Grant said, was trying to figure out how to capture all of the things that we think matter and that we value and that illuminates our commitment to equity and inclusiveness into one accountability framework or set of frameworks that are fair and equitable, and that really gives a view of how a school is performing. And I will say this here because I know it is something that Dr. Grant shares. While I absolutely value and think that we've done the great work in terms of the measures, we know that this is one tool that we have in our toolkit to talk about how we provide our oversight functions, and that a school is not just the accountability score that they have. Any parent that I talk to, I say, go to the school and see how that school feels to you. But I do know that parents want to know, if you are the oversight body, what are the things that you value? How are you measuring it? How are you reporting it? And how are we going to have some level of consistency of getting that information? And I think what you saw boil down to 15 slides here is the effort of both of our agencies to try to do that with, as you mentioned, Chair, some complex technical information, but to boil it down to what we think at the core of it are our values.
Thank you both. Board members.
Welcome, Dr. Grant. Thank you for joining us this evening. I have a question for either or both of you. How would you explain to a parent what it means when the same campus or LEA gets different scores on the DC school report card and our proposed accountability framework?
Dr. Walker Davis, do you want to go first, or?
Yes. So I think one big hurdle that we have avoided, just given where we are, and that I was concerned about, as I think this board knows, OSSE had a star ranking system just a while ago that also had 5 levels, and but we're going in the opposite direction, with 5 being the highest and 1 being the lowest from what we proposed. OSSE is not using that particular ranking system, so I think that that takes away 1 level of complexity around this work. I think the other, the real answer to this sits at the wonderful choice system that we were talking about when we were talking about EdFest, right? This is a jurisdiction that has a robust set of choices with a strong traditional school district and 69 other LEAs. And I think we start there with explaining to families that we have a statewide system that gives you information about how all of our public schools are performing. And because charter schools are unique and have different governing structures and different missions, if you will, we as the authorizer have our own system for evaluating whether or not they are meeting the commitment that they made to the city through their charter. Like, that is the simplest explanation. Then we can get into who gives more points or less points for what. But at the end of the day, those two systems exist for very different purposes. And while they may be measuring some of the same things, charter schools are operating in a much different way than our traditional district. And we need this level of accountability to make sure that they are meeting the commitments that they made to this board. So that is what I would say for that.
I mean, my super quick.
I hope my staff was taking notes, because I will.
Yeah, I was like, that good answer, Dr. Walker Davis. No, but I mean, I think truly when I joined and I was like, oh, we have stars, they have tiers, and they don't align. And so one thing that you all will note is that we've removed the star ratings in the recent revision to our accountability framework. And so the summative score is federally required. We have to have a framework and we have to produce that score. We are in robust conversations with our state board and our engagement around how we view that score. Is it shown on a continuum? Where does it appear on the report card? But the conversation that I would engage in with the family, one of the reasons why we were really, Dr. Walker Davis and I and our teams have been focused on showing the side by side of what we're measuring is though the points differ slightly, we OSSE are collecting the data that the Public Charter School Board is using in the building out of these frameworks. And so what you'd see is by and large, we are looking at the same metrics. And so this current report card that we've just released is the first time we've applied our new framework to the system. It will be interesting to see how close or far apart we are when both frameworks are operating at the same time. But my one sentence answer to a parent would be, well, OSSE no longer tiers schools. We just report overall performance. And this is a public charter school, and the public charter school framework and tiering as it would play out would be your first source on better understanding how your school is performing. And then you should look at the DC school report card to get a deeper understanding of what is taking place with that school as it relates to all schools in our system. And maybe that wasn't one sentence, maybe it was two, but that's how I would approach it. And I do want to acknowledge we have two very strong teams on the back end of this that are watching. Dr. Walker Davis and I, we have taken this accountability framework design conversation so seriously in hopes that we will be able to produce frameworks to our families that, again, they're not singing the same song, but they're playing the same music. And that's really important for us.
Thank you. I think this is a really important communication point because it's not intuitive or obvious to people why the two systems exist and how they're different. What you've just done is to explain they have different purposes, and you've explained that clearly. I believe as a general matter that more information is better than less, unless more information is confusing. And we do run the risk of confusing with more information here that may look to people to be similar, but is really different. But you've laid out a very clear way for communicating to people what the differences between the two systems are, the different purposes they serve, and why we have them, and why two different systems make sense.
Mm-hmm. I feel good because that's so Jim is the attorney, and I'm like, if it's clear to Jim, we're moving in the right direction.
Dr. Grant, it's great to see you here. Dr. Davis, thank you for your presentation. One thing I've been just thinking about is we all know the ultimate purpose of these accountability systems is to improve the results that our schools deliver for students and families. So I just wanted to hear from both of you, what are our kind of greatest hopes and aspirations for what these systems will do to positively impact students and families?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the conversation you heard me speak about is the overall conversation around school quality. And when we say our children go to a high quality school, what do we really mean? And for us, that is are they proficient on our standardized assessments? And our assessments measure proficiency. They don't measure we want to ensure that children in third grade can read at a third grade level. But we also want to know deeply which schools and in which communities and in which ways are growing students to proficiency and what learnings can take place in those academic environments. So at the state level, we can replicate those environments. And then when they fall short, how do we provide, I mean, this is a key distinction between the SCA and the authorizer. How can we provide technical assistance, guidance, support, create communities of practice and learnings so that schools who are achieving can actually serve as sites of inquiry for schools that are on their achievement journey, it's exciting to be in a position for us to have a framework that allows us to deeply look at data and have those conversations. And so that's the dream state that we're operating in. You know, our shift in our metrics to reward growth, increasing the weight on student growth, adding a high school growth weight, adding in attendance growth. When we have an attendance hearing tomorrow, and now we have an accountability framework that literally helps us understand which schools can grow attendance. Like, it's that level of understanding that allows us to be a better, stronger state education agency. And then you all, as a public charter school board, you know, you make a multitude of decisions about the livelihood of your schools, and the richness of the data allows you to have a more informed conversation. And so that's the behind the scenes on why these shifts truly, truly matter, and why you will hear myself and Dr. Walker Davis talk about what's the journey to keep adding more. And I should say, and to Jim's question, there have been such deep investments in transparency in the data in Washington, D.C. You know, we are now able to be a state education agency that can produce this level of high quality data, and we take great pride in being able to do so.
I appreciate Dr. Grant lifting up the technical assistance piece of this, because we're in a unique position as an authorizer in terms of our role to monitor, evaluate, and sometimes make difficult decisions. And while I believe that the revised accountability system lets us lean into all of the priority areas in our strategic plan, I think it's most evident that we are talking about excellent schools, but it is also about enduring partnerships, right? Because this allows us to shine a light on where we see things working and where we think that there are challenges, and encourage folks to come in and support schools. We're not the ones at the ground level providing the technical assistance or bringing additional resources to the school, but by shining a light on where we need that to happen, it allows us to create partnerships and create an ecosystem that is going to have that level of technical assistance and support. It also allows us to think about what we need to do as an organization to effectively have such a robust accountability system. So for me, our role in helping to support ultimately the increased student achievement is the first step to say, where are we doing well, and where does collectively the community need to focus? What does the LEA need to focus on? What do those who support the LEA need to focus on? And what do we need to do as an entire ecosystem to ensure that that work is happening? So it is the first step. It is one part of a collective effort to increase student achievement.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely can hear that from both of you. And I think speaking of differences, I did have one other question. I think this one for you, Dr. Grant. We're obviously still finalizing our framework. And I think one of the tensions that's arisen, there are several, right? But like one that I think about that's unique to the sort of a charter only framework is sort of this idea, we've talked about it in recent public meetings, of you want to make sure that schools are not penalized for sort of what kinds of students they serve or who they take in, right? Like that was kind of one tension that showed up for us. And I wonder, like, what, as you all, the finishing touches on your frameworks, what were some of the like toughest trade-offs or choices that you all faced? Just, you know, again, as we think about kind of the last bits, you know, decisions we have to make on getting this right.
Well, one, I'm going to say this, and I think a bunch of people are going to yell, but one, you know, you do have to revise the framework, assess students, and then apply. Like, you actually have to run the process to then step back and see what are you learning in real time. I think the tensions are real and should be real. The hardest part for Dr. Walker Davis and you all as a board is to say, okay, pencils down. We have made significant shifts. We have acknowledged growth conversation. We can check and say that we have acknowledged feedback across multiple communities, and we have made shifts that reflect what we have heard. That was the hardest part at OSSE, right? That even, I'm telling you, I looked at that side by side and I was like, oh, we should have done. And then I was like, no, Christina, we are where we are. We have made the shifts that we have made. And now we have 2 years of assessment data, and we've just released the set of report cards. And we are looking at how this new framework tells a different story. And then we can step back and say, yep, it was right to add an additional metric for dual enrollment. Yep, it was right to add a metric on chronic absenteeism. And there will still be work left to do. So if you were like, what's the hardest part? The hardest part is getting to a place where you are like, at this moment in time, these are the shifts we're going to make. We are going to acknowledge work that needs to continue to be done. And then I think as a board, I like take off my superintendent hat and put my authorizer hat on. Like, you can set the clock or decide like how many years of data would you like to play out with this framework before you step back and engage in a process to push the framework even further. But the hardest part, honestly, when we went from, all students 75 points to saying we're actually going to parse that out, those are the trades. But in looking at this year's report card, I mean, we literally could look at how schools grew students and literally see how that point distribution played out and how we defined quality of our system. That's a truly rewarding feeling, but it doesn't happen. It didn't happen if like a year ago, last January, we were like, okay, state board, pencils down. we have to submit this to get it approved so that we can actually apply it. And we feel good about the shift. And it allows us, again, I started by saying that this is truly an equity-driven conversation, because we know now that our system did decrease the correlation between socioeconomic status of our students and their school score, because we increase the weights on growth and we increase the weights on economically disadvantaged students, right?
Yeah.
Is it perfect? No. Is it significantly better than it was before? Yes.
Yeah. That is a great advice, Dr. Grant, and I think welcome advice if I think about the DC PCSB team that's been working hard on revising this framework a lot.
And holiday cheer. It's really hard work.
I do think that's really, really important advice for us to take on board. So thank you for that wisdom.
Hi, Dr. Grant. It's good to see you. So Dr. Walker Davis talked about it a bit, right? So as the authorizer, we don't provide the technical support, right? So even if we identify the issues and things, it's not what we do directly as an authorizer. And so I'm curious for you to share a little bit more about what support to those comprehensive support and improvement schools look like. From OSSI in terms of technical support. I heard you share the money that they get. I heard, I think, briefly around a plan that they need to submit to support that money. But can you just break it down in kind of layman's terms in terms of what it looks like to actually support those lowest performing schools? Because those could be, at this point, right, you represent the state. This is not just, well, we're not a state, but that's a whole nother conversation. But you represent DC. And so that could be a charter school or it could be a DC public school, right? So what does support look like to those schools that fall within those designations?
Well, right now, for the sake of this conversation, we have two charter schools that are designated in the bottom 5%, and support looks like a process that's largely in alignment with the federal government on comprehensive school improvement, where the schools produce improvement plans. They step back with myself, the team, and our deputy mayor, and we literally investigate progress toward improvement along a multitude of areas and the areas of concern for that school. It could be performance, it could be attendance. It's usually an alignment of multiple factors. And then improvement does look like the state monitoring of that continuous improvement plan. If you watched Dr. Walker Davis and I a couple of weeks ago, we are deeply engaged in this process. of understanding what the future of school improvement will look like in the district. Right now, we conduct need assessments with their communities to understand the root causes that are playing out in their school. We identify targeted areas for improvement across a multiple of factors. We conduct resource equity analysis. We review their funding streams. We support them with the identification of measurable goals and evidence-based strategies, and we support them in a process through progress monitoring and an annual review. Sounds a lot like authorizing, but it is direct targeted support to that school community. And the work that we're engaging in at OSSI right now is strategic planning around what the future of this work could look like. At state education agencies, there's a continuum between high touch agencies and low touch agencies. And we're seeking to evolve, not to a super high touch, but we want to squarely be in the middle to directly provide technical assistance, to bring schools into community with each other, to leverage our data, to actually navigate schools toward improving. And that's work that we are engaging in right now. As I said earlier, right now, each school that's in the bottom 5% is roughly getting $300,000 of additional grant funding to support them in that journey. We all know that that is not enough money if we want the schools to improve faster or allow them to do unique and innovative things along that continuum. And so those are the types of conversations. I framed out what we currently do. We are deeply going through a process to frame out what this work could look like in a more comprehensive way. And that is where it actually is helpful that you have a state education agency, because we can do that work in support of the school from a technical assistance perspective and not bump up against what would not be appropriate for an authorizer to do. I really, having worn the hat, schools do need safe, transparent places and spaces to improve, to seek support, guidance, etc. And more times than not, that work should not be done by the authorizer. And so we are stepping back with various stakeholders to figure out what is the right place and space for a DC public school or a DC public charter school to receive deep technical assistance along the lines of what they would need in order to improve. And the next phase of this work kicks off because the next set of schools to be designated will happen in 2024.
Yeah. So the thing that I would note for both you and Dr. Walker Davis, as well as for the public, I hope that you two will continue to work as closely together around that piece of it, because I'm going to put my other hat on, which is as a former founder and school leader. When you have two different people that you're talking to around improvement and there's not alignment, that is never helpful to a school that is really trying to get it right for children who so desperately need us to get it right. So I would just ask, as you're going through that process, I know you and Dr. Walker Davis work closely together, and we are lucky to have both of you in this role. Please don't take your foot off the gas when it comes to that piece of it, right? Because this is, and I'm not in any way taking away from the hard work that has gone on for both of you around and your teams around creating these frameworks. Now, when we start to get into implementation and actual like action and response to these frameworks, we know we're going to have schools that struggle. That's the bottom line. We all want them to be great, but they're going to be schools that struggle. And when you are a school leader on the ground, just trying to deal with what's happening within your building, but then you've got kind of two different voices telling you what you need to do and how you need to move on that, you can find yourself as a school leader, particularly some of our single site LEAs that don't have the capacity in the same way that maybe some of the larger network offices do, and or maybe a DC public school that may have the central office to kind of do a lot of that work. It can be extremely challenging to navigate. And so I just ask that you two continue to stay aligned. And, I know that you said this was your first invite, but you can come back anytime. Just feel free to reach out. And, let's continue to talk about like what that looks like so that it feels as seamless as possible to those who will be the recipients of both frameworks and the responses to the same.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's important that I've run a charter network of schools across multiple states, and that is even funner. I think that's another twist on being a single site, because you're dancing for multiple authorizers. But this work will start with our schools at the center and their voices at the center. And so you should know that, like, this isn't Dr. Walker Davis and I, nor our teams just stepping back and saying, well, the schools must do this. It's far more thinking around, like, how do we center all of our schools into this posture of continuous improvement? And then what does that look like for our schools that are in most need? I think the bottom 5% is the floor of our focus, but we should be able to have comprehensive supports for all of our schools, so that we are continuing to push improvement further. And right now, that's the work that's front of mind for Dr. Walker Davis and I. Well,
And
I
I
know
would just,
Walker Davis is getting that framework approved, and then it's
yeah.
it's really seeing it in action. And I will tell you that you see the shifts in action, and it allows you to have a very different conversation. We looked at how schools perform, and both the chancellor looked at his schools and Dr. Walker Davis, and it's exciting when you know the actual school and you see the score and you're like, oh, that's because of this, or that happened because of this. And schools had similar responses. And so it's fun to see the framework in action.
Yeah, Chantal, I just want to appreciate you lifting that up, because we've been talking throughout this entire process about the communication that will be necessary for this shift, right? And I think it starts with us being clear and firm on the values that are informing this revision on our part, going back to the equity and what we will be able to see and lift up as a result of the changes. But I also think that it is about, and I appreciate Dr. Grant saying what you did, which is we haven't put this out there yet and we haven't seen it in action. And this is an agency that has had 8 years under our prior performance management framework. Whether people like it or not, it's in the ether. They know what it is, and it will take time for us to adjust to this new system. But all along the way, I think it's going to be important for us to communicate what it is and actually what it isn't, right? This is the first step in communicating what it is and what it isn't in relation to the state accountability system. But the point that you're making is, if it is this and it gives this information, then what is the action that we are hoping to drive as a result of that? And most importantly for our schools, where are those resources now? Do they exist now? And if they don't exist, how can we be a part of at least having a conversation around the need, right? So I appreciate Dr. Grant lifting up the technical assistance that OSSI provides. And until we get to that medium state that Dr. Grant mentioned, there is room for the folks who are currently in our ecosystem to think differently about how they are supporting our schools, right? It is on us to be able to explain what new information can you gather if you are a partner organization from our framework, and what responsibility do you now have to support schools differently with that information. But I get your point, and I do think we will continue to have to keep that single site in mind. I know our staff is thinking about how do we support the continuum of schools, and how do we create something that gets at the heart of our values, but understands who is going to be negotiating that on each of the ends of that spectrum.
I want to reiterate my gratitude for for this presentation tonight, for this conversation, and I'm reflecting again that looking around this virtual room, we all have the privilege to play the roles that we play, thanks to the trust that families have in choosing to enroll their kids in a DC public charter school. And really what sits at the center of all of this, the schools are the kind of unit that we entrust to educate kids and that families are choosing. It's the students who really sit at the center of all of this. And we, unlike many other cities in the country, have, I believe, we are among the few that have seen an enrollment increase in our public schools over the last few years that have been so difficult. So our work is cut out for us. That is one metric that seems positive. But all of this conversation tonight is around getting more clear on the work that we have to do in service to those students so that we can continue to earn and gain and retain the trust of families that choose to enroll in public schools. So thank you so much for all of this. I want to give you the chance to continue to enjoy your evenings. I also want to see if our board has any new business as we look forward to a couple more months of learning and listening before we make any kind of before we make a final decision.
I don't have any other questions, but just want to say thank you to both of you. Dr. Walker Davis, we get to say it pretty often. Dr. Grant, I don't know that we get to say it often enough, but thank you for what you do and your service to the city. We're lucky that we have you, both of you guys.
Amen.
You better bring it, Jim, with the amen.
Dr. Grant, thank you for taking time as we enter the holiday season to be here for this conversation. This is just indicative of the partnership that I have enjoyed working with you and just the value that you have for this work. You do it with grace, you do it with humility, and you always do it with our young people and our older students in mind. And so thank you for your partnership and the thinking and feeling that you bring to this work every single day.
Thanks in advance for all of our conversations for the rest of the week. No, truly, you should know that I talk to Dr. Walker Davis almost every day, if not weekly. And thank you all as board members for allowing us to come into the space. Again, you know, not work you would have always seen at one iteration of relationships between OSSI and the Public Charter School Board, but we are able to go this far because we're going together. And so it does mean a lot that we get to do this work together. And I am really grateful for Dr. Walker Davis. You have like an exceptional leader of your system. And so thanks for having me. And I actually do have another meeting. So I hope you all have a good night. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. All right, board members, do we have any new business? Seeing none, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn the December 18th, 2023 board meeting.
I second.
Thank you. I'll take a roll call vote. Jim Sandman,
Aye.
Chantel Wright,
Aye.
Nick Rodriguez,
Aye.
Leah Kuzi is also an aye. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you. Happy holidays,
holidays.
everyone.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.